July 12, 1944, near Saint-Lô, Normandy. Rain turns the hedgerows into dark, choking walls of mud. The smell of cordite still hangs in the air as American infantrymen move cautiously between shattered farmhouses, boots sinking deep with every step. Somewhere behind the lines, artillery thunders like a distant storm that refuses to pass. Inside a stone barn with its roof half collapsed, Captain William Harper, U.S. Army, wipes rain from his helmet and looks down at the men sitting on the dirt floor. 3 of them. German officers. Their field grey uniforms are soaked, rank insignia dulled by grime and defeat. One of them, tall, sharp-featured despite exhaustion, keeps his back straight. His name, Harper has been told, is Hauptmann Ernst Vogel, a staff officer from a Panzer Grenadier division that no longer exists as a coherent unit. Harper lights a cigarette, offers one. Vogel hesitates, then accepts. They have already talked about maps, unit positions, artillery shortages, standard questions. But then Vogel asks something unexpected, his English precise, almost academic. "Captain," he says quietly, "how long have your men been in combat?" Harper exhales smoke, surprised. "Depends on the unit. Some since North Africa, some since Italy. Some just landed a few weeks ago." Vogel nods slowly, and when they are finished, Harper raises an eyebrow. "Finished?" "When they are exhausted," Vogel says, "when they can no longer function." Harper studies him for a moment, then answers without drama. "They get rotated out, rear areas, England, sometimes home." The barn is silent except for the rain. Vogel blinks. "Home," he repeats, as if testing the word. "Yes," Harper says. "Home." The German officer stares at the dirt floor. When he looks up again, something in his expression has shifted. Not anger, not fear, but something closer to disbelief. "In our army," Vogel says, "there is no such thing. You don't see it immediately on the battlefield. Not in the explosions or the casualty counts. But this difference, is already deciding the war." Vogel had been fighting since 1941. Poland, France, Russia. Then France again. Years of marching, freezing, retreating, advancing, watching replacements arrive younger each time, less trained, more afraid. No rest, no pause. Only orders. He gestures with his cigarette toward the American soldiers outside the barn, men laughing despite the rain, one of them carefully drying a photograph before putting it back in his breast pocket. "They fight," Vogel says, choosing his words carefully, "as if they believe they will survive." Harper doesn't respond. He doesn't need to. The concept of combat fatigue is not new. Armies have always known that men break. The difference is what they do when it happens. By 1944, the U.S. Army has an answer Germany never fully develops: rotation. American infantry divisions are bloodied, pulled back, rebuilt. Aircrew fly a set number of missions, then go home. Tank crews rotate. Even frontline riflemen, if they survive long enough, are cycled out to hospitals, training depots, rear units. The system is imperfect. Men still crack. Some never make it home. But the policy exists, written, enforced, institutional. For the German army, the idea borders on fantasy. Vogel explains it slowly, almost bitterly. In Russia, men stayed until they were killed, captured, or lost their minds. Officers too. Especially officers. He looks at Harper. "Do you know what happens when a battalion commander cannot think anymore?" Harper shakes his head. "He is replaced," Vogel says, "usually by someone worse." That night, after the interrogation, Harper writes his report. He notes Vogel's remarks, underlining one sentence twice. Enemy officers express disbelief at U.S. rotation and rest policies. Morale impact significant. He does not yet understand how significant. Across Normandy, German divisions are collapsing not only from bombs and bullets, but from exhaustion. Men fight on autopilot. Officers make rigid decisions because flexibility requires mental energy they no longer have. Meanwhile, American units, battered, yes, but relieved, reinforced, return to the line, sharper than before. A sergeant who has slept in a clean bed for 3 nights sees faster. A lieutenant who has eaten hot food thinks clearer. A rifleman who believes he might live long enough to go home fights differently. Weeks later, Vogel sits in a POW camp in southern England. Clean clothes, regular meals, medical examinations, psych evaluations. He is interviewed again, this time by intelligence officers who want more than troop movements. They want understanding. One of them asks, "Why do you think Germany is losing?" Vogel does not hesitate. "Because your army learns," he says, "and ours only demands." He pauses, then adds quietly, "and because your soldiers are allowed to be human." Back in Normandy, American units push forward again. Some of the men who fought through the hedgerows are gone, rotated out, evacuated, sent home. New faces take their place, but the knowledge remains. The system endures. And somewhere in the ruins of Europe, German officers begin to realize that this war is not only being won by factories and firepower, but by something far more fragile and far more powerful. The human mind. September 3rd, 1944. Le Mans, France. The road into Le Mans is clogged with traffic. Trucks nose to tail, armored columns edging forward. Ambulances weaving through gaps with sirens muted but urgent. Dust hangs in the late summer air, coating everything in a pale brown film. To an untrained eye, it looks like chaos. To Major Thomas Ellery, U.S. Army logistics officer, it looks like something else entirely. A schedule. Ellery stands beside a clipboard, watching a column of infantry trucks roll in from the front. Men sit slumped in the back, helmets loose, eyes hollow. Their uniforms are stiff with sweat and dirt. Some stare straight ahead. Others sleep sitting upright, heads bumping against rifle stocks as the trucks lurch to a stop. A sergeant jumps down, salutes weakly. "3rd Battalion, 115th Infantry. Rotation complete, sir." Ellery nods. "Get them fed. Medical check in 30 minutes. Transports to Cherbourg leave at 0600 tomorrow." The sergeant hesitates. "Sir, they're really going?" Ellery looks him in the eye. They did their time. This moment, unremarkable to American officers by 1944, would have been unthinkable in the German army. For Germany, war is a test of endurance. For the United States, it is a problem to be managed. From the beginning, American planners assume the war will be long and psychologically brutal. Lessons from World War I still echo through military schools. Shell shock, breakdowns, mass exhaustion. The conclusion is simple: a soldier is not an inexhaustible resource. So the US builds rotation into the system. Air crews fly a fixed number of combat missions. Infantry units are pulled off the line when casualties and fatigue reach a threshold. Men suffering from battle exhaustion are treated, not punished. Some return to duty. Others are reassigned. The policy is bureaucratic, unglamorous, and devastatingly effective. Captured German officers encounter it piece by piece, like men slowly realizing the rules of a game they never knew existed. In POW camps across Britain, interrogation reports repeat the same observations. American units appear fresher after periods of withdrawal. Enemy morale recovers quickly after rest. German formations receive no equivalent relief. One German colonel reportedly asks an interrogator, "How can you afford to let men leave the front?" The answer is always the same: because we planned for it. The German army, by contrast, has planned for permanence. Officers are expected to fight until death. Soldiers fight until they are killed, wounded beyond recovery, or captured. Mental collapse is often treated as weakness. In the East, it is sometimes treated as cowardice. By 1944, Germany no longer has the manpower or the ideological flexibility to change course. Veteran divisions are hollowed out, filled with teenagers and older men. Officers who have survived years of combat command units that exist mostly on paper. Decision-making becomes rigid, predictable. Fatigue doesn't just slow reaction times, it destroys initiative. An exhausted officer does not improvise. He follows doctrine. He repeats past solutions even when the situation has changed. American commanders notice this. After-action reports from Normandy and later from the breakout toward Paris describe German responses that are technically correct and fatally slow. They defend where doctrine says to defend. They counterattack when orders demand it. They do not adapt. At a POW facility near Oxford, Hauptmann Ernst Vogel sits across from a different interrogator than before. A psychologist this time. "You mentioned exhaustion," the man says, flipping through notes. "Can you describe it?" Vogel stares out a window for a long moment. "It is not being tired," he says finally. "It is when your thoughts become narrow. You stop seeing possibilities." He taps the table once with his finger. "You stop believing that tomorrow will be different from today." The psychologist nods. "And when did that begin?" Vogel gives a thin smile. 1942. By the time American forces reach the German border, the contrast is impossible to ignore. Entire US divisions that fought in Normandy are resting, refitting, preparing for the next phase. New men train under veterans who have seen combat. Veterans who are alive because they were allowed to step away before breaking. German units facing them have often been in continuous action for months. Some have been in combat for years. An American private crossing into Germany in late 1944 carries a quiet, almost unspoken belief. If I survive this, I might go home. A German private carries a different certainty. This ends here. The shock German officers feel is not envy alone. It is recognition. Recognition that the enemy understands something fundamental about modern war, that morale is not a speech and courage is not infinite. It is sustained, maintained, repaired, and once that realization sets in, it cannot be unseen. December 17th, 1944. Ardennes Forest, Belgium. Snow muffles the sound of engines as American trucks creep along narrow forest roads. Pine branches sag under fresh, white weight, brushing helmets and canvas covers as columns inch forward. The cold bites through wool and skin alike, sharp enough to make men curse through clenched teeth. Lieutenant James Red Callahan, 26th Infantry Division, pulls his scarf tighter and watches his men dismount. Their faces are pale, eyes red-rimmed from exhaustion. But there is something else there too. Focus. They have been here before, fought before, and survived. Callahan checks his watch. They have been in reserve for 3 weeks. Hot food, dry socks, training drills instead of artillery fire. Enough time to remember what it feels like to be human. Now they are going back in. Across the lines, German forces surge forward in what will later be called the Battle of the Bulge. It is their last gamble. An offensive powered not by abundance, but by desperation. German officers drive their men forward with speeches about honor and sacrifice. They do not speak of rest. There is no time. There is no system left to support it, even if there were. Some German battalions attacking through the snow have been fighting continuously since Normandy. Their commanders are hollow-eyed men who have slept in snatches, whose decisions come slower now, whose tempers snap without warning. Fatigue has become invisible and lethal. American intelligence officers begin to notice something unsettling. Intercepted German orders are rigid, timelines unrealistic, assumptions optimistic to the point of fantasy. Units are ordered to advance long after their ability to do so has collapsed. This is not poor planning. It is cognitive collapse. Callahan's unit takes fire near a frozen stream. German infantry appear between the trees, moving stiffly, methodically, as if rehearsing an old drill. Callahan reacts instantly. Flanking maneuver, suppressive fire, coordinated withdrawal to a stronger position. His men move without hesitation. Later, after the fight, one of his sergeants shakes his head. "Those Germans, they didn't adjust at all." Callahan nods. He's seen it before. They're tired. Captured German officers during the Ardennes speak with unusual candor. One major, taken after his regiment disintegrates under American counterattacks, sums it up bluntly. "We were not defeated by your weapons," he says. "We were defeated by time." He explains that his men had been in combat for nearly 8 months without meaningful rest. Replacements arrived untrained. Officers rotated only by death. "When the attack began," he says, "we were already finished." In American rear areas, the contrast is stark. Men suffering from what is now officially termed combat exhaustion are pulled aside, evaluated, treated. Some shake uncontrollably. Some cannot speak. Some stare into nothing. They are not shamed. They are told, "You've done enough." Some will return. Some will not. Either way, the army absorbs the cost, because it understands the alternative. A broken soldier in the line does not just fail himself. He fails everyone around him. German doctrine never truly adapts to this reality. The ideology of endurance, forged in early victories and hardened on the Eastern Front, becomes a trap. Officers pride themselves on pushing through exhaustion, even as it erodes their judgment. By late 1944, German command structures are filled with men who should have been relieved months earlier. Instead, they are promoted. Exhaustion is rewarded with responsibility. In a POW camp in France, Hauptmann Ernst Vogel listens as news of the Ardennes fighting filters in. He hears that German forces initially advanced and then stalled. He is not surprised. "They cannot sustain it," he tells a fellow prisoner. "They no longer know how." When asked why, "Ob Hand von Mosk," he answers simply, "Because they never stop." The Americans do stop, not because they are less committed, but because they are thinking beyond the next attack. They rotate units not as mercy, but as strategy. A rested division is not just stronger, it is smarter, more adaptable, more dangerous. By early 1945, the pattern is undeniable. German formations shatter after brief resistance. Counterattacks fail almost immediately. Officers issue orders that no longer reflect reality on the ground. Fatigue has become a silent weapon wielded against them, one they cannot counter. Callahan survives the Ardennes. Weeks later, his unit is pulled back again. Another rest period, another chance to recover. He writes a letter home, something he could not have done months earlier. "I don't know how long this will last," he writes, "but I think I'll make it." That belief, fragile, powerful, is something his enemy no longer possesses. March 7th, 1945, Remagen, Germany. The Rhine flows fast and cold beneath the iron trusses of the Ludendorff Bridge. Smoke drifts across the river as American artillery pounds the far bank, shells cracking the air with sharp, metallic echoes. The bridge is damaged, wired for demolition, but still standing. Captain Karl Friesen, German Army engineer officer, grips the railing and stares at the explosives that should have already destroyed it. His hands shake, not from fear alone, but from exhaustion so deep it has become physical pain. He has not slept properly in weeks. Orders have come and gone, contradictory, delayed, revised. Communications fail. Subordinates look at him with empty eyes, waiting for decisions he no longer trusts himself to make. When the American tanks appear, rolling through the smoke toward the bridge, Friesen hesitates, just long enough. The explosives do not detonate fully. The bridge remains. That hesitation, measured in seconds, opens the heart of Germany to the Allies. American forces pour across the Rhine, establishing a bridgehead that accelerates the collapse of the Third Reich. Historians will later analyze wiring faults, damaged charges, technical failures. But none of that explains why Friesen did not recheck the detonators himself. He was finished. In the days that follow, German resistance fractures. Units surrender in clusters. Officers no longer attempt elaborate maneuvers. The war becomes a series of withdrawals, collapses, white flags. American after-action reports describe an enemy that often fights briefly, then disengages or gives up entirely. This is not cowardice. It is depletion. In prisoner cages along the Rhine, German officers sit silently, staring at nothing. Some answer questions readily. Others struggle to remember details of their own commands. A U.S. intelligence officer writes, "Enemy leadership exhibits extreme fatigue. Decision-making impaired. Morale critically low." The pattern repeats everywhere. The American army, by contrast, is rotating entire divisions. Veterans of Normandy and the Ardennes are stepping off the line, not all of them going home, but many sent to training units, occupation duty, preparation, or simply rest camps. Fresh units cross the Rhine, led by officers who are tired, but not broken. The system continues to function. Captain Friesen is captured 2 days after Remagen. During interrogation, he is polite, cooperative, distant. An American officer asks him why the bridge was not destroyed. Friesen closes his eyes. "I knew what had to be done," he says. "I could not make myself do it." The officer waits. "There was no strength left," Friesen continues. "Not in me. Not in anyone." German generals attempt to impose discipline as the front collapses. Orders threaten punishment for retreat, for surrender, for failure. But discipline cannot restore clarity. It cannot replace sleep. It cannot repair a mind that has been pushed past its limits for years. The realization that German officers had feared since Normandy now becomes unavoidable. The American army is not just advancing. It is enduring. It absorbs losses, rotates its men, and returns to the fight renewed. Every pause makes it stronger. Germany has no pauses left. In POW camps across Western Germany, officers speak openly now. There is no reason not to. One colonel, once decorated for bravery on the Eastern Front, tells his interrogator, "You treat exhaustion as an injury. We treated it as a moral failure." He shakes his head slowly. "That was our mistake." As American forces push deeper into Germany, the war loses its shape. There are no longer clear fronts, only pockets of resistance surrounded by overwhelming strength. The enemy is not outmaneuvered. He is outlasted, and behind every American advance is an invisible machinery. Not just factories and supply depots, but schedules, rest rotations, medical protocols, a system designed to keep men functioning when others collapse. Captain Friesen spends his nights in captivity, replaying the moment on the bridge. The hesitation, the missed chance. He knows now that it was not technical failure. It was exhaustion. And exhaustion, once it takes hold, is merciless. May 9th, 1945, near Bad Aibling, Bavaria. The war is over. The gunfire has stopped so abruptly that the silence feels unnatural. In a meadow outside a requisitioned farmhouse, American soldiers lounge on crates and vehicle hoods, helmets off, cigarettes burning down between their fingers. Laughter comes in short bursts, unsure at first, then freer as the reality settles in. Across the field, under guard but without chains, German officers sit apart. Their uniforms are neat now, cleaned for surrender, but the men inside them look older than their years. General Major Friedrich Keller stares at the Alps in the distance. He has commanded divisions, signed death orders, watched armies dissolve under his authority. Now he waits for processing like a clerk at the end of a shift. An American lieutenant approaches with paperwork. He is young, clean-shaven. "You'll be transferred to a permanent camp within 48 hours, sir," the lieutenant says. "Medical check tonight. Full debrief in the morning." Keller nods absently. "Lieutenant," he says, stopping the man. "How long have you been at the front?" "On and off since 43, the American replies. "Italy first, then France." Keller looks up sharply. "On and off?" "Yes, sir." The general exhales slowly, a sound that carries years of realization with it. "Then you will live a long life." In the weeks after Germany's surrender, Allied intelligence conducts thousands of interviews. Not interrogations now, conversations. German officers talk freely, often at length, about what failed. They mention fuel, bombing, numbers. But again and again, the subject returns to something less tangible: fatigue. One former Corps commander explains it clinically. "By 1944, he says, our decision-making cycles were broken. We reacted, we did not plan. We obeyed, we did not assess." Another officer, a veteran of both world wars, puts it more bluntly. "We used up our best men too early," he says, "and we never let them rest." American analysts begin to see the full picture. Germany did not simply lose soldiers faster than it could replace them. It lost clarity. An army that never pauses eventually forgets why it fights, how it adapts, and when it must change. In American camps, soldiers are already being processed for return home. Some will stay for occupation duty. Others will board ships within weeks. There is fatigue here too, but it is different. It has an end point. Men talk about jobs, sensul, families, unfinished lives. The future re-enters their vocabulary. That alone changes everything. Hauptmann Ernst Vogel, now thinner but calmer, sits at a table during his final debrief. The American officer across from him asks a familiar question one last time. "Why do you think the United States won?" Vogel does not answer immediately. "Your factories mattered," he says eventually. "Your air power mattered. Your numbers mattered." He pauses. "But more than anything, you knew when to stop." The officer looks up. "Stop?" "Yes," Vogel says. "Stop pushing men beyond the point where they could think." Long after the war, American military doctrine will formalize what was learned in blood and exhaustion. Rotation policies, tour limits, psychological care, institutional memory. Not because it is humane, but because it works. The German army, once feared for its discipline and endurance, becomes a case study, a warning etched into history. Courage is finite, endurance is conditional, and no army, no matter how disciplined, can ignore the human mind forever. June 1945, Camp Lucky Strike, Le Havre, France. The tents stretch across the fields in perfect rows, canvas glowing pale under the early summer sun. Trucks idle. Orders are called out calmly, without urgency. The war machine still exists, but now it runs at half speed, winding down. Thousands of American soldiers wait here for ships home. Some sleep. Some write letters. Some simply sit and stare, letting the noise inside their heads finally quiet. Sergeant Frank Delgado, 1st Infantry Division, sits on a crate polishing boots he no longer needs to polish. He fought in North Africa, Sicily, Normandy. He survived the hedgerows, the bulge, the push into Germany. He should feel triumphant. Instead, he feels empty. A medical officer stops nearby, checking names off a list. When he reaches Delgado, He pauses. You ever talk to anyone? The officer asks gently. Delgado looks up. About what? The officer gestures vaguely. All of it. Delgado thinks for a moment, then shakes his head. Not yet. The officer nods. You will. Across the camp, behind a wire enclosure, German officers wait for transport to longer-term captivity. They are quieter than before. The bitterness has faded. What remains is reflection. One of them, General Major Friedrich Keller, watches the American camp with something close to fascination. Men resting, men waiting, men alive. He turns to another German officer beside him. Do you know what we mistook for strength? The man doesn't answer. Keller continues anyway. Relentlessness. In the months that follow, Allied analysts compile their findings. Reports circulate through military academies, command staffs, war colleges. The conclusion is understated, almost bureaucratic. Combat effectiveness declines sharply without systematic rest and rotation. But beneath the language is something profound. Modern war is not won by who can suffer the longest. It is won by who can recover. The German army had believed that pushing men past their limits forged superiority, that endurance equaled virtue, that collapse was moral failure. The American army believed something else, that a soldier was a resource, not to be consumed, but to be managed. And that belief shaped everything. Years later, long after the uniforms are folded away, veterans remember the moments that saved them. Not the battles, the pauses. A few nights without shellfire. A meal without rushing. A moment when someone in authority said, "You've done enough." Those moments kept minds intact long enough to keep fighting, and long enough to come home. In interviews decades later, former German officers often return to the same memory. The shock, not of American firepower, not of American numbers, but of the idea that an enemy army expected its soldiers to survive the war. That expectation changed how Americans fought, and it revealed too late what Germany had lost. The war ends not with a final clash of armies, but with men standing still, some preparing to go home, others trying to understand why they never could have. The lesson remains, written quietly between the lines of history. An army that cannot rest will eventually break, and an army that understands the human limit will outlast one that does not.